Hey there. Tonight, we're traveling way back, not to grand palaces or marble temples, but to an age when gods, monsters, and mortals wandered through a world forged by destiny and fire. You'll drift through the complete saga of Greek mythology. From the first stirrings of chaos to Olympus' rise, to those quiet echoes of myths that still shape our world today. You'll encounter heroes who bled for glory, lovers who defied deities, and beings born from sea foam, thunder, and pure stubbornness. If these ancient tales help you unwind, feel free to like and subscribe, but only if they truly bring you peace. Drop a comment about where you're listening from and what time it is. There's something oddly comforting knowing others are dozing off to these same timeless stories. So dim your lights, let the gods whisper, and let these myths unfold as we begin. At the very beginning, before anything existed, before heroes, cities, even before those silent watching stars, there was only chaos. Not the messy kind with shouting and spilled wine, but chaos with a capital C. An endless void of potential. No sky, no sea, no light or dark, just the infinite quiet before everything. Then, something stirred. From this emptiness emerged Gaia, Mother Earth herself, vast and eternal, the steady foundation for all that would someday walk upon her. Next came Tartarus, those shadowy depths beneath the world, more endless abyss than actual place. Then appeared Ether, not some dainty cherub, but the raw cosmic force that draws things together, setting creation in motion. From this strange silent symphony, more primordial beings emerged. Darkness, Erebus, and night, Nyx, who gave birth to day, Hemera, and light, Ether. But most crucially, Gaia birthed Uranus, the starry sky who arched above her like a celestial canopy. Together, earth and sky would create mythology's first dysfunctional family. And like most families, things started lovely, then got complicated fast. Gaia and Uranus had 12 children, 6 daughters and 6 sons, the mighty Titans. Among them were Oceanus, who wrapped the world in watery embrace, Hyperion, who carried the sun across heavens, Themis, who embodied divine law, and Mnemosyne, the spirit of memory. These Titans were powerful, strange entities born from earth and sky, destined to shape existence. Unfortunately, Uranus found his offspring unsettling. Maybe they were too large, too loud, or maybe he just wasn't ready for fatherhood. So he did the unthinkable. He shoved them back inside Gaia. Yes, literally inside their mother, always a bad sign in mythology or medicine. Gaia, understandably distressed by having 12 cosmic children crammed inside her, began plotting revenge. She forged a giant sickle from stone and approached her trapped sons in the darkness. One by one she begged for help. One by one they stayed silent, except Kronos, the youngest Titan. Kronos possessed a sharp mind and terrifying patience, a dangerous combination. He took the sickle and waited. When Uranus next descended to embrace Gaia, Kronos leapt from the shadows. In one brutal stroke, he castrated his father and flung the remains into the sea. From Uranus' blood that fell to earth sprang bizarre creatures, the Erinyes, Furies, giants, and nymphs. From the sea foam where his flesh drifted emerged something unexpected, Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, fully formed and radiant. Apparently in Greek myths, even horrific violence can produce supermodels. With Uranus deposed, Kronos claimed dominion over the cosmos. He freed his siblings and ruled during the so-called Golden Age, when newly formed humans lived without sorrow and gods hadn't started meddling yet. But prophecies lingered. With his final breath, or whatever equivalent a sky god has, Uranus cursed Kronos, warning that he too would be overthrown by his own child. Having personally demonstrated how this works, Kronos decided to avoid history repeating through a classic solution, eating his babies. He married his sister Rhea, normal for gods, and every time she gave birth, he swallowed the child whole. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, down they went, trapped inside their father's dark belly. After losing 5 children to this culinary paranoia, Rhea devised a plan. When her 6th child was born, she wrapped a stone in swaddling clothes. Kronos, ever the efficient tyrant, swallowed it without checking. The real baby, Zeus, was whisked to Crete, hidden in a cave and raised by nymphs and a divine goat named Amalthea. There, under dripping stalactites, Zeus grew strong, fed on stories about siblings he'd never met, siblings still alive but imprisoned inside their father. When Zeus came of age, he left the cave disguised as a servant and infiltrated Kronos' court. With grandmother Gaia's help, he slipped a special potion into Kronos' wine, something bitter, ancient, and mildly volcanic. Kronos began coughing, then gagging, then with a sound that would echo through Olympus for generations, he vomited up 5 fully grown gods plus 1 large rock. Reunited at last, Kronos' children stood together, not weakened, but divine and furious. War became inevitable. The Titanomachy, the cosmic war between old gods and new, raged for 10 brutal years. Kronos rallied the Titans to Mount Othrys while Zeus and his siblings made their stronghold at Mount Olympus. The world itself groaned under their clashing powers. At first, neither side could gain advantage. The Titans were ancient and terrifyingly strong, but the Olympians were clever. Zeus descended into Tartarus, the underworld's deepest pit where monsters slept and time grew heavy. There he freed the Cinemanes, 100-handed giants, and Cyclopes, imprisoned long ago by Uranus for being too inventive. In gratitude, the Cyclopes forged divine weapons, a thunderbolt for Zeus, a trident for Poseidon, and for Hades, a helm of darkness making him invisible to gods and mortals alike. Armed with these gifts, the tide turned. Zeus' lightning split mountains, Poseidon's floods drowned battlefields, Hades moved unseen, spreading terror. Slowly, the Titans fell. Kronos was defeated and bound in unbreakable chains. Most Titans were cast into Tartarus, guarded by the 100-handed giants. Only a few escaped punishment: Themis, who remained neutral, and Prometheus, who aided Zeus. Atlas, the Titans' general, received special punishment: to hold up the sky, not the earth, forever, with terrible posture and no breaks. With victory secured, the gods divided the cosmos. Zeus took the sky, Poseidon the seas, Hades the underworld. Earth remained shared territory, not from kindness, but because nobody wanted cleaning duty. Mount Olympus became the gods' new throne. There they would rule, fight, feast, and make disastrous decisions that would echo through mortal lives for centuries. The age of Titans had ended. The age of Olympians had begun. And in those early shadows, other stories waited. Tales of men, monsters, and that stubborn, inescapable force called fate. By the time the gods stood united, the world itself seemed to hold its breath. Olympus and Othrys loomed like loaded spears across the horizon, the air between them thick with tension. War wasn't declared with speeches. It simply was. Kronos, humiliated, had fled to Mount Othrys with his remaining Titan allies, ancient beings who'd once shaped the world's bones. These weren't politicians but elemental forces, and they were furious. Meanwhile, atop Olympus, Zeus gathered his siblings, fewer in number but determined. Hestia the steady, Demeter the wise, Hera already sharpening her tongue for future arguments, Hades silent, Poseidon restless, and Zeus standing tallest. The world wasn't ready for them. When war erupted, it shook existence to its roots. Lightning tore across unaccustomed skies, mountains cracked as if Gaia's bones were breaking. For 10 years the battle raged, the clashing so loud it echoed through time itself. If you listened closely, you could hear the collective sigh of warriors realizing this would take way longer than expected. The Titans had age and strength, but the gods had youth and spite, which history proves can go shockingly far. Yet despite their fury, the Olympians were losing. The Titans held fast on Othrys, their fortresses built from stone and arrogance. Kronos was no fool. He knew war as well as prophecy. Every Olympian assault met brutal resistance. At night, even the stars seemed to flicker with exhaustion. It was then that Gaia herself intervened. Though she'd birthed both Titans and Olympians, endless warfare had wearied her. The ground split open, rivers ran foul, even those fragile mortal experiments were noticing the seasons going haywire. Gaia whispered to Zeus in his dreams, "If you want victory, you must dig deeper." So Zeus descended into Tartarus, a pit so deep even echoes hesitated to visit. This wasn't some sightseeing trip. In that endless blackness lurked creatures older than fear itself, bound in eternal silence. At the very bottom, he found them, the Cinemanes, 3 brothers each sporting 50 heads and 100 arms, shackled with chains that screamed when touched. Uranus had imprisoned them ages ago, disturbed by their chaotic nature and, frankly, the logistical nightmare of handshakes. Nearby crouched the Cyclopes, those one-eyed master smiths unjustly jailed for being too good with magma and metal. Zeus shattered their bonds like wet parchment. The very walls of Tartarus trembled as the giants stretched limbs unused for centuries. No speeches were given, just a solemn nod of understanding. The Cyclopes, grateful though covered in forged soot, presented their gifts. For Zeus, the thunderbolt, not merely a weapon but a piece of the sky's fury bottled for his hand. For Poseidon, a trident that could make oceans kneel. For Hades, a shadow-woven helm granting perfect invisibility. It was their way of saying thanks, though the wrapping left much to be desired. With these divine tools, the Olympians launched their final assault. What followed wasn't so much a battle as reality itself being rewritten. Zeus' thunderbolts carved new riverbeds through mountainsides. Poseidon's trident cracked continents apart while tidal waves swallowed Titan fortresses. Hades, invisible beneath his helm, slithered behind enemy lines like a bad thought. No door could stop him. No mind was prided. Kronos fought fiercely, his ancient sickle flashing through stormlight. He'd ruled the cosmos and tasted fear. He wouldn't go quietly. But power wrested from the old rarely returns to them. Slowly, inevitably, the tide turned. Zeus struck him down. No grand speech, no dramatic flourish, just one sky-shattering bolt of pure fury, and the Titan King fell. With Kronos defeated, the remaining Titans broke. Some fled like startled crows. Others dropped weapons and knelt, hoping mercy might spare them. Most were hurled into Tartarus, bound behind black stone walls with the 100-handed giants as eternal jailers. Their punishment wasn't poetic, just brutally effective. A select few escaped this fate. Prometheus, who'd whispered counsel to Zeus when others dared not. Themis, who'd measured justice even as kin screamed for blood. These useful minds were spared. But Atlas, the Titan general who refused to bend, received his famous sentence to stand at reality's edge holding up the celestial dome itself, not the earth as often misrepresented, with terrible back support and no paid time off. With the war ended, the victorious gods faced their next challenge, governance. The world couldn't remain unclaimed. The three brothers drew lots. Zeus got the sky and its rolling thunder. Poseidon claimed the seas and all who sailed or sank within them, while Hades, without complaint or smile, simply nodded and took the underworld, that shadowy realm where dead souls wander. Some roles choose their bearers. Earth became shared territory, not out of fairness, but because none could agree who'd take cleaning duty. Olympus became their celestial throne room, a place high above mortal reach where storm clouds danced and the air smelled of ambrosia. From here they'd rule, but peace didn't come easily. Scars remained. Resentment festered. Despite their power, these young gods remained prone to jealousy, pride, and spectacularly bad decisions involving mortal lovers. A new age had dawned. The Titans' reign was over. The Olympians now ruled supreme, but their story was only beginning. With thrones filled but wisdom lacking, their divine dysfunction would soon spill into mortal lives with chaotic consequences. Already, the fates were spinning new threads, heroes were being born, and monsters stirred in the shadows. The greatest myths were yet to unfold. Meanwhile, in this newborn order, humanity remained conspicuously absent. The world had mountains and rivers, forests teeming with life, seasons cycling elegantly, but something crucial was missing. No intelligent eyes gazed at stars, no campfire stories were told, no prayers rose to the heavens. The gods had their kingdom but lacked an audience. It was Prometheus, forethought, who noticed this void most acutely. While others obsessed over power or revenge, he'd always been drawn to creation. During the war, he'd sided with the Olympians not from loyalty, but belief in what they might build, a future now clearly incomplete. Without mortals to walk its surface, the world felt hollow. So Prometheus descended from Olympus, wandering through valleys until he reached a quiet riverbank. Kneeling in the mud, he gathered clay and began shaping it with an artist's care and a parent's wonder. Not from pride, but from that quiet urge all creators know, to make something that might look back and marvel. He molded limbs, curved spines, added grasping fingers and wandering feet. Most importantly, he gave them eyes that could admire sunsets and mouths that could ask, why? When the forms were ready, he breathed divine life into them. Not just air, but spark and soul. These weren't animals or gods, but something entirely new. They were humans. At first they were clumsy, stumbling through forests confused yet curious. Lacking claws or fangs, they feared darkness and cold. But they learned quickly, crafting tools from stone, mimicking bird calls, building shelters from branches. They were fragile but endlessly inventive. To Prometheus, they were magnificent. Zeus, however, was less impressed. From his golden throne, he observed these new creatures with suspicion. "They resemble us," he grumbled, voice thick with unease. Prometheus replied evenly, "They were inspired by us." Zeus scowled. "They're weak. Look, they can't even survive a frost." "They can learn," countered Prometheus. "They shouldn't need to." Zeus snapped. "They should be worshipping." Outwardly, Prometheus nodded. Inwardly, he disagreed. He continued watching his creations, troubled by their suffering, shivering in caves, eating raw food, their lives brief and harsh. What they needed was fire, but fire belonged solely to Olympus, burning in Hestia's hearth and Hephaestus' forge. No mortal could touch it. Zeus had decreed it. So Prometheus stole it anyway. One starlit night while Olympus slept, he crept to Hestia's eternal flame, plucked a single coal and hid it in a fennel stalk's hollow stem. He carried this smoldering gift down to humanity, and with it, everything changed. Fire transformed their world. It warmed caves, cooked meals, forged stronger tools. Humans gathered around flames to tell stories and pass knowledge. Smoke curled upward like prayers. Fire became proof they were different from beasts, that they carried something divine within. Zeus was furious. "You gave them fire?" He roared, lightning dancing at his fingertips. "They needed it," Prometheus stated simply. "They'll challenge us. Make them forget to fear. Then they'll flourish," Prometheus replied. Zeus saw no wisdom here, only defiance. As punishment, he ordered Prometheus chained to Caucasus' highest peak, where each day an eagle would tear out his regenerating liver. Eternal agony for loving his creation too much. But Zeus wasn't finished. If Prometheus gave one gift, Zeus would give another, one wrapped in beauty and peril. He commanded Hephaestus to mold a woman from clay, each Olympian contributing traits. Aphrodite gave beauty, Hermes persuasion, Athena skill, Hera pride. But from Zeus came curiosity. They named her Pandora, all gifted, and gave her a sealed jar with one warning: don't open it. No matter what you hear or feel, leave it closed. Prometheus, bound and distant, couldn't warn his brother Epimetheus, afterthought, who welcomed Pandora eagerly. She was clever and kind, asking about human ways. But that jar haunted her. What lay inside? Why forbid it? One day, curiosity won. The moment she lifted the lid, horrors erupted. Disease, envy, sorrow, madness, greed, war, every suffering unknown to mankind now free. Pandora slammed the lid, too late. But from the jar's depths came a faint sound. Hope, the only thing not escaped. Humanity now faced pain, but also the means to endure it. Meanwhile, chained to his mountain, Prometheus would sometimes close his eyes and remember fire's first moments, not the theft or flight, but human faces illuminated in wonder. A child touching flame then laughing. An elder tasting cooked food for the first time. That was worth every eagle's beak. Humans evolved rapidly with fire, settling, forging bronze tools, singing not just from fear but joy. They danced around flames, married by its light, whispered secrets to embers. Societies grew crude but determined, fire at every village's heart. As for Pandora, she wasn't wicked, just curious. She wept not just for released suffering, but feeling like the god's pawn. Yet hope remained, warm and quiet, reminding her that even the used can find redemption. Zeus eventually accepted humans wouldn't vanish. They prayed, cursed, but kept building, their fires never extinguished. By the time he secured Olympus' throne, one might hope he'd settle into dignified rulership, maybe host some divine banquets. Instead, Olympus became less a seat of power and more a dramatic arena of feuds, jealousies, and very loud arguments. At the center stood Zeus, king of gods and serial commitment phobe. For all his power, he had one consistent weakness: mortal women, nymphs, goddesses, and occasionally shapes that vaguely resembled women. His tastes were eclectic, his disguises inventive, golden rain. Really, his timing catastrophically bad. But the one being who never overlooked these indiscretions was his wife Hera, queen of gods, marriage's guardian, and patron saint of eternal grudges. Their marriage was, diplomatically speaking, an ongoing disaster. To understand Hera's rage, consider Zeus' extracurricular activities. He didn't just flirt, he transformed into bulls, swans, clouds, all to chase love or lust, depending who you ask. Each affair left demigods, tragedies, and divine gossip in its wake. Take Io, a Hera priestess Zeus seduced. When Hera approached, he panicked and turned Io into a white cow. Hera, not fooled, claimed the cow as a gift and assigned hundred-eyed Argus to guard her. Zeus sent Hermes to kill Argus and free Io, so Hera sent a gadfly to torment her endlessly across the world. Io's wanderings named places: Ionian Sea, Bosporus, Cow Crossing, before she reached Egypt and regained human form. Her story was never forgotten. Neither was Hera's wrath. Then there was Leto, a gentle Titaness Zeus impregnated with twins. Hera decreed no land under sun could shelter her. Leto wandered desperately until reaching floating Delos, where after 9 agonizing days she birthed Artemis and Apollo, 2 future Olympians who'd never forget their mother's suffering. Worse was Semele, a Theban woman Zeus truly loved. Hera, disguised as an old nurse, planted doubts. If your lover's really Zeus, shouldn't he reveal his full glory? Bound by oath, Zeus did. His divine form instantly incinerated her. Yet from ashes came Dionysus, rescued as an unborn child sewn into Zeus' thigh until birth. Because nothing says paternal love like a thigh pregnancy. These weren't isolated incidents. Zeus' union spawned heroes like Heracles, Perseus, Helen of Troy, hatched from an egg after Zeus seduced her mother as a swan. Human history intertwined with divine passion and Hera's furious fallout. Her vengeance rarely targeted Zeus directly. She couldn't override the king. Instead, it fell on his lovers and their children, exile, torment, or twisted fates. Heracles suffered most, driven mad to kill his family, then forced into 12 labors. Yet Hera was more than jealousy. She was Olympus' queen, demanding respect. Her punishments, though harsh, were consistent. She embodied order in a pantheon of chaos, permanence in a world shaped by whim. Somehow, they stayed together, maybe from duty, stubbornness, or because heavens need their king and queen. Their marriage, full of betrayal and bickering, reflected not perfection but endurance, a truth anyone in long relationships recognizes. Strangely, these affairs served cosmic purpose. Their offspring became bridges between gods and mortals, founding cities, fighting monsters, living just long enough for tragic songs. Zeus never stopped ruling, Hera never relinquished her crown. Their disputes became divine theater shaping weather, politics, fate. One thunderbolt might signal a tantrum, one Hera glare could doom kingdoms. Mortals caught in their drama rarely escaped unscathed. So gossip continued. Mortals whispered about gods and love being punished, nymphs avoided cloud-shaped strangers, kings built Hera temples hoping to avoid her gaze. For all Zeus' chaos and Hera's vengeance, one constant remained. Their stories lived on in temples, pottery, sailors' tall tales. Even now they persist in constellations, words like narcissist, how we speak of hope and tragedy. We still love like Pygmalion, echo like that voiceless nymph, wonder what threads the fates spin as we sleep. So rest now among these old stories. Let gods climb back to Olympus, heroes sheath their blades. Tonight there's nothing to slay, just silence, sleep, and stars slowly turning. If you listen closely, you might hear the fate spindle still spinning. The contest for Athens. With the gods firmly established on Olympus and their divine dramas unfolding, one question lingered. Who among them would guide civilization forward? Not through brute force, but with wisdom, skill, and something more lasting than conquest? The answer came not through war, but through a contest. At the heart of this tale was a fledgling city, nestled between rocky hills and the sparkling Aegean. Its people were resourceful but uncertain. They had stone, salt, sun, and gods. What they needed was a patron, a divine protector who would give their city a name worthy of history. 2 gods stepped forward. First came Poseidon, lord of the sea, earth shaker, tamer of horses, and occasional flood enthusiast. Proud, powerful, and loud, he strode into the city square, raised his mighty trident, and struck the earth with a dramatic flourish. The ground trembled, lightning split the sky for effect, and from the stone burst a magnificent spring of water. The crowd gasped. The spring shimmered in the sunlight, cool and clear. Then someone tasted it. Salt water. Poseidon, god of oceans, had given them a salt spring. Beautiful, yes, perhaps useful for exfoliating, but utterly undrinkable. The people coughed politely into their tunics. exchanging glances. Athena waited for the murmurs to fade. Then, with quiet grace, she knelt beside the parched soil, pressed her fingers to the earth, and from that spot, a small shoot emerged. It grew slowly, steadily, until it became a sturdy olive tree, its leaves rustling in the breeze, branches heavy with promise. The people gathered close. They tasted the olives, pressed them into oil, rubbed it on wounds, burned it in lamps. They marveled at its shade, its fruit, its longevity. No theatrics, no thunder, just a tree, and with it, a future. The gods judged Athena the victor, and the city was named Athens in her honor. This marked a turning point, not just for one city, but for mythology itself. Poseidon returned to his waves, while Athena became a symbol of something new. Intellect over impulse, patience over bluster, growth over spectacle. But Athena was never just about cleverness. She embodied practical wisdom, knowledge applied. She guided architects, strategists, artisans, and thinkers. She didn't just win wars, she prevented them, or at least ensured they were fought wisely. Her invisible hand shaped inventions, the bridle, the ship, the chariot. Music, mathematics, philosophy, all bore her influence. While Ares roared across battlefields, Athena quietly built cities that outlasted wars. Yet for all her restraint, Athena was not immune to pride. The weaver's challenge. In a small town far from Olympus, a young woman sat at her loom. Her name was Arachne, and her weaving was extraordinary. Her tapestries shimmered with life. Forests, feasts, gods, and monsters, threaded with colors so vivid they seemed divine. People traveled miles to see her work. And then, one day she boasted. "They say Athena taught me," she told the crowd. "But I taught myself, and I weave better than any god." Now, if history has taught us anything, it's that comparing yourself to a god rarely ends well. Athena heard the claim. Instead of smiting Arachne instantly, she disguised herself as an old woman and approached. "You should be careful," she warned. "The gods do not take kindly to such pride." Arachne shrugged. "Let Athena come. I'd challenge her myself." Athena dropped the disguise. The loom fell silent. "I accept." The two began to weave. Athena's tapestry showed the gods in all their glory, majestic, wise, radiant. A masterpiece of divine dignity, every thread singing with celestial pride. Arachne wove something different. Her tapestry told the truth. It showed the gods' mistakes, petty rivalries, jealousies, cruelties. Zeus' disguises, Hera's rages, Apollo's curses. The images were vivid, flawless, and brutally honest. When they finished, Athena examined both. She could find no flaw in Arachne's work, no missed stitch, no clumsy pattern. It was perfect, and it was insulting, not because it was false, but because it was true. Athena's anger flared, not from jealousy, but from disappointment. The girl had talent, yes, but no reverence, no humility. So she did what gods do when pride is pricked. She punished her. With a touch, she transformed Arachne into the first spider, condemned to weave intricate webs in silence for eternity. Her descendants would continue the craft, spinning beauty from air itself. It was a lesson, not just about pride, but about the fine line between talent and arrogance. Athena didn't hate excellence, she demanded it. But she also demanded respect, for gods, for gifts, for the balance between inspiration and hubris. Athens under Athena's gaze. Under her watch, Athens became the cradle of learning, philosophy, democracy. Its streets buzzed with debate, its temples gleamed with marble, and that olive tree still stood on the Acropolis, a quiet reminder of the day wisdom triumphed over force. Yet Athena was never a goddess of comfort. She challenged mortals to think harder, build better, question deeper. Her favor went not to the strongest, but to the cleverest, the disciplined, the bold. From her place above the city, she watched, not with warmth, but with clarity, and waited for those who dared to think. The divine twins, Apollo and Artemis. The birth of Apollo and Artemis wasn't just the arrival of two new gods. It was a celestial quake that reshaped both Olympus and the mortal world. Born to the Titaness Leto after 9 excruciating days of labor, and Hera's relentless attempts to prevent their birth, these twins embodied light and shadow, grace and vengeance in perfect balance. One would command the sun and music, the other the moon and the hunt. Their wrath would become legend. Apollo emerged first, radiant, golden, impossibly charismatic. Even as a newborn, his eyes burned like dawn over calm seas. A god of countless talents: music, healing, prophecy, poetry, and, less admirably, being right all the time. Artemis followed moments later, calm and composed, her silence sharper than any arrow. Guardian of wild things, goddess of untamed forests, and the perfect shot taken without hesitation. Their childhood lasted about as long as it takes to tell it. Divine infants became fully grown gods within hours. Apollo's first act? Remembering how the monstrous serpent Python, sent by Hera, had hounded their pregnant mother across the lands. Now armed with a silver bow from Hephaestus, Apollo tracked Python to Mount Parnassus and filled the beast with arrows until the valley fell silent. Where Python's corpse fell, Apollo established Delphi, home to history's most famous oracle, where priestesses breathed hallucinogenic vapors and spoke truth in riddles. Apollo shone bright, but his light could burn. His affections, once kindled, were catastrophically persistent. One day, while strolling through the forest, bow slung over one shoulder, smug grin under his laurels, he encountered Eros, mischievous god of love, often overlooked and dangerously easy to underestimate. Apollo, fresh from his Python victory and lacking humility, quipped, "Careful where you point those toy arrows, little one. Leave real archery to the gods." Eros didn't laugh. He knocked 2 arrows, one gold, to kindle love, one lead, to repel it. The gold struck Apollo's heart. The lead pierced the nymph Daphne, who'd been minding her own business nearby. What followed was poetry in motion. Apollo chasing, Daphne fleeing, until she begged the river god to save her. In a blink, she became a laurel tree. Apollo, clutching her bark, declared it his sacred plant. Future poets and victors would wear its leaves, a bittersweet symbol of glory and unattainable desires. Artemis, meanwhile, proved harder to trap. Fiercely independent, she roamed forests with her band of maiden hunters, hair unbound, bow at the ready, perpetually distrustful of bearded men. Her wrath, though rare, was surgical. When the hunter Actaeon accidentally saw her bathing, she didn't rage, she just stared. One glare transformed him into a stag, and his own hounds tore him apart. No gloating, no remorse. She simply returned to the water. Not cruel, just divine. Together they shaped Greek thought. He the sun, she the moon. He prophecy, she childbirth. He punished with fever, she with silence. Not opposites, but complements, their duality reflecting nature's balance. Apollo's temples gleamed gold. Artemis followers left offerings in forest clearings. Both demanded purity, one of intent, the other of body, and both proved that divine beauty could be deadly. Apollo's complexity deepened over time. He healed plagues, but also sent them. When Marsyas challenged him to a music contest, Apollo played his lyre so perfectly the muses declared him victor, then flayed Marsyas alive for daring to compete. When Queen Niobe boasted of her 14 children compared to Leto's 2, Apollo and Artemis descended like a storm. He slew her sons, she her daughters. Only one child was spared, depending on the poet. Niobe fled to Mount Sipylus, where she turned to stone, her petrified form still weeping during rainstorms, a grief too deep for mortals, too justified for gods. Yet Apollo wasn't without mercy. He inspired healers, protected the young, whispered to oracles. His mortal lovers, male and female, met tragic ends, but their stories lived in song. A god of contradictions, like sunlight that both nurtures and scorches. Artemis too held paradoxes. She aided childbirth yet demanded chastity, blessed the hunt but protected animals, loathed men yet guided some through wilderness. a stern guardian, but also a comfort to those walking alone at night. Mortals feared them not for cruelty, but because gods operate on scales too vast for human minds. Earn Apollo's favor with a perfect hymn, incur his wrath with one wrong note. Cross Artemis' path and be blessed, or become a campfire cautionary tale. Yet amidst Olympus' scheming pantheon, their bond remained strangely tender. When one grieved, the other darkened. When one triumphed, the other smiled. Sun and moon, prophecy and instinct, fury and grace. Together they whispered to mortals, divine beauty doesn't mean divine safety. The ages of man and the great flood. The age of gods was never quiet, but for a time, the world found its rhythm. The Olympians ruled from above. Seasons turned. Mortals offered sacrifices with trembling hands. Yet beneath this surface calm, something festered, a slow corruption in humanity's heart. For mankind had not always been so wretched. The first humans lived in a golden age, literally. They spoke in song, shared harvests freely, never locked doors. No wars, no greed, no taxes. But like all good things in myth, it didn't last. What followed was the Silver Age, longer limbs but shorter tempers. These new men ignored the gods, squabbled over flocks, built walls around their homes. Pride without purpose, labor without love. They lived longer but not wiser. Then came the Bronze Age, where humanity's decline became a full-blown crisis. Men forged weapons instead of plows, turned eyes to conquest. Villages became fortresses, brothers killed over borders. Altars crumbled as prayers turned hollow. Zeus watched from Olympus. He'd seen mortals at their best, humble, joyful, curious. Now they staggered drunk on their own cruelty. It wasn't just the violence, it was the forgetting. They'd ceased revering the gods who gave them breath. And Zeus hated being forgotten. He considered thunderbolts, a few well-placed strikes to remind them of heaven's wrath. But lightning was fleeting, the rot ran deep. This required not punishment, but cleansing. So he summoned his brother Poseidon. Flood them. Poseidon, never one to refuse chaos, grinned and drove his trident into the seafloor. The earth groaned. Waves rose like angry giants. Clouds gathered, heavy, black, pregnant with doom. At first, the rain fell soft, like hesitant tears. Then the sky split open. Rivers burst their banks. Lakes vomited over shores. The sea forgot its boundaries, swallowing hills whole. People ran, climbed, prayed, some to long-neglected gods, others to the uncaring sky. It made no difference. The waters rose all the same. Temples collapsed like sandcastles. Forests disappeared beneath churning gray. Cities of men, once loud with pride, fell silent as statues of marble gods dissolved into the stones they'd been carved from. And still the rain kept falling. The survivors. In this watery apocalypse, two souls endured. Deucalion, son of Prometheus, and Pyrrha, daughter of Epimetheus and Pandora. Warned by his Titan father, Deucalion built a wooden chest, just large enough for two. As the world drowned, they climbed inside and held each other tight. Days blurred into weeks. The earth became a featureless sea, but their makeshift ark floated on, bobbing between ruin and rebirth until, with a hollow thud, it struck something solid. Mount Parnassus. Stepping onto the damp rocks, they found a world scrubbed clean. Not the hush of evening, but the silence after a scream. They wandered through the wreckage, broken pottery, waterlogged sandals, a child's doll wedged in a crevice. The weight of being the last humans pressed harder than the flood ever had. At a dying fire's embers, Pyrrha whispered, "Now what?" The question echoed beyond them, to the gods themselves. They prayed not to Zeus, who'd caused this, but to Themis, goddess of divine law. Her answer came on the wind. "Cover your heads. Walk down the mountain. Cast your mother's bones behind you." At first they hesitated. Their mothers were long gone. Then Deucalion understood. Mother Earth, her bones are stones. So they gathered rocks, veiled their heads, and began descending. With each step, stones tumbled behind them. Deucalions became men, Pyrrhas became women. Humanity, version 2. This new race wasn't golden. They didn't glow, but they were durable, and they remembered heroes and their labors. Not every battle in Greek myth was fought by gods. Some fell to mortals, men with breakable bones and very human fears, handed impossible tasks by those who lived above the clouds. Yet they fought, not for glory, though some claimed otherwise, not for fame, though it often followed, but because the world demanded it. Perseus, the accidental hero. His story began with a prophecy, like most unfortunate tales. His grandfather, warned that Perseus would kill him, locked the boy and his mother Danae in a wooden chest and cast them into the sea. The chest washed ashore, as they tend to do, and Perseus grew up among fishermen, strong, kind, and altogether too heroic to stay anonymous. Trouble came when a local king, smitten with Danae, demanded Perseus bring him Medusa's head. Now, Medusa wasn't your average monster. Her gaze turned men to stone. Her hair was a nest of living snakes. Most would decline this request. Perseus, unfortunately, was not most people. With divine help, Hermes' winged sandals, Hades' helm of darkness, Athena's mirrored shield, he flew to Medusa's lair. He didn't look at her directly, only at her reflection, and with one swift stroke, severed her head. From her blood sprang Pegasus and the giant Chrysaor, because in myths, heads are entire ecosystems. On his return, he saved the chained princess Andromeda from a sea monster, married her, awkwardly, considering the snakehead luggage, and accidentally fulfilled the prophecy by killing his grandfather with a stray discus. A classic Greek tragedy, equal parts heroic and absurd. Heracles, the broken demigod. If Perseus was the prototype hero, Heracles, Hercules to Romans, was the overbuilt sequel. His story began with rage and remorse. Driven mad by Hera, he slaughtered his wife and children. To atone, he was given 12 labors, each more impossible than the last. Nemean lion, its hide impervious to weapons, so Heracles strangled it barehanded and wore its pelt as a cloak that screamed, "Do not approach." Lernaean hydra, for every head chopped off, 2 grew back, until Heracles' nephew Iolaus cauterized the stumps with fire. Teamwork makes the dream work. Ceryneian hind, a golden deer so swift he chased it for a year before capturing it gently. The ancient equivalent of corporate team-building exercises. 4 to 12 included cleaning the Augean stables by rerouting a river, stealing the mares of Diomedes, which ate human flesh, and fetching Cerberus from the underworld, essentially dog-sitting for death itself. By the end, Heracles was more than mortal, not quite a god, but no longer just a man. His story was suffering and endurance, mistakes and redemption. A mirror for all who struggle. Theseus, the forgetful king. His journey began with identity. Raised away from his father, king of Athens, he proved his lineage by lifting a boulder to retrieve a sword and sandals. En route to Athens, he cleared the road of bandits, building his resume one corpse at a time. But his true test was the Minotaur, a half-man, half-bull monster in Crete's labyrinth, where Athens sent 7 youths yearly as tribute. Theseus volunteered. With Princess Ariadne's help, she gave him a sword and a ball of string, the real MVP. He slew the beast and followed the thread back out. Victorious, he sailed home with Ariadne, then abandoned her on an island. The myths gloss over why. Worse, he forgot to change his ship's black sails to white, the agreed victory signal. His father, seeing the dark sails, leapt to his death in grief. Thus Theseus became king, not through wisdom, but through forgetfulness. The hero's paradox. What bound these men together wasn't strength or lineage, but the simple act of trying, again and again, despite fear, failure, and gods who moved the goalposts. Perseus fought with borrowed tools. Heracles bore guilt heavier than any lion's pelt. Theseus won kingdoms, but lost what mattered most. They weren't perfect. They weren't meant to be. Their greatness came from facing the impossible anyway, not because it was easy, but because someone had to. And when their stories were told, it wasn't the victories people remembered most, but the costs. That perhaps is why these old heroes linger. not in marble or stars, but in every moment someone chooses to stand despite being afraid. Because the monsters were never just monsters. They were fear, grief, guilt, things no sword can truly kill. Yet someone always tries. The fates and the fragility of mortal lives. Before gods shaped thunder or heroes drew swords, there existed the Moirai, the three fates who spun, measured, and cut the threads of every life. Even the Olympians, for all their shimmering power, bowed before these sisters. Clotho, the youngest, spun each soul into being with fingers as delicate as they were absolute. Her spindle never ceased turning, it hummed the soundtrack of existence. Lachesis, the middle sister, measured those threads, determining their length, their strength, their entanglements with others. She never smiled, but her eyes gleamed with quiet knowing. Atropos, the eldest and most severe, wielded the shears. When she snipped, there were no appeals, not even Zeus could make her pause. This was the inescapable truth. Every destiny had been woven long before a child's first cry or a warrior's final breath. Narcissus, the boy who loved reflection. Among fate's cruelest jokes was Narcissus, so beautiful cities paused when he passed. He had the kind of face that made poets retire early, the kind of hair that made gods consider taking up hairdressing. But beauty untempered curdles into arrogance, and Narcissus cared nothing for the hearts he broke. The nymph Echo learned this bitterly. Once a chatterbox, she'd been cursed by Hera to only repeat others' words, a punishment for distracting the goddess during Zeus' affairs. When she encountered Narcissus in the woods, she tried to speak. "Is anyone there?" he called. "There," she echoed, stepping forward. "Come to me. To me. Leave me be. Me be." As he walked away, Echo wasted into nothing, until only her voice remained, haunting valleys and caves, forever repeating fragments of conversations she could never start. Nemesis, goddess of retribution, witnessed Narcissus' cruelty. She lured him to a still pool where he saw his reflection and fell desperately in love. Days passed as he stared, unblinking, until he withered away. Where he knelt, a white flower grew. The Narcissus, its face forever bowed toward water. Pygmalion, the sculptor who loved stone. In Cyprus lived Pygmalion, a sculptor disgusted by real women's flaws. So he carved his ideal from marble, a statue so perfect it ached. He dressed her in silks, whispered to her, slept beside her cold form, dreaming of warmth. Aphrodite took pity. One evening as Pygmalion kissed the statue's hand, he felt ivory soften into flesh under his lips. Galatea, she who was milk-white, blinked awake. They married, had children, and presumably lived happily, though the myths tactfully avoid asking Galatea how she felt about being wished into existence. The weight of divine gifts. These stories reveal the paradox of Greek myths. God's gifts often became curses. Narcissus' beauty isolated him. Echo's voice became a prison. Pygmalion got his perfect woman, but at what cost to her autonomy? Even Prometheus' fire brought both progress and Pandora's evils. The fates never explained their designs. Some threads snapped young, others tangled endlessly. Mortals could only live their allotted span, brief and bright as a spark from Hestia's hearth. As lamps flicker low across Athens' marble porticos, remember, the spindle still turns. Your thread's length was decided long ago. All that remains is how you weave its pattern. The underworld's silent kingdom. While Olympus glittered and mortals toiled, another realm existed, one where sunlight never trespassed and whispers hung like mist. This was Hades' domain, the underworld, where souls drifted like smoke through fields of asphodel, their voices stolen by the river Lethe's waters. Unlike later visions of hellfire, Hades wasn't a place of punishment, just endless, quiet inevitability. 3 judges, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus, weighed each soul's deeds, but most wandered the gray meadows without joy or torment. Only a few received special sentences. Sisyphus, the cunning king who cheated death twice, now pushed a boulder uphill only for it to roll down eternally. Tantalus, who served his son as dinner to test the gods, stood in a pool that receded when he tried to drink, beneath fruit branches that lifted from his grasp. Ixion, who lusted after Hera, spun forever on a flaming wheel. These weren't moral lessons so much as cosmic jokes, the gods ensuring certain hubris became literal burdens. Orpheus and Eurydice, love's failed gamble. The musician Orpheus nearly changed the underworld's rules. When his bride Eurydice died of a snakebite, he played his lyre so beautifully that Cerberus whimpered, the Furies wept, and Hades himself agreed to release her, on one condition: don't look back until sunlight touches her. Of course, at the threshold, doubt one. Orpheus glanced over his shoulder for half a second, and Eurydice faded with a whisper, "You loved me too much to trust me." His grief turned dangerous. He scorned other women, so Maenads tore him apart. His head, still singing, floated downriver to Lesbos, where it kept giving prophecies. Even dismembered, art outlived its maker. Persephone's dual throne. The underworld's only brightness was its queen, Persephone, Demeter's daughter, kidnapped by Hades but later ruling beside him. Her story explains seasons. When she ascended to Olympus for 6 months, Demeter made crops grow. Her return to Hades brought winter. Unlike other abduction myths, this one held strange tenderness. Hades gave Persephone pomegranate seeds, not just to bind her, but as wedding gifts. She ate 6, dooming herself to return, but also claiming power as more than a prisoner. By the classical era, she presided over Eleusinian mysteries, offering initiates hope that death wasn't oblivion. Living visitors to the dead, a few mortals walked Hades' halls and returned. Odysseus sacrificed black sheep to summon shades, learning his fate from the blind prophet Tiresias. Aeneas carried the golden bow to meet his father Anchises, who showed him Rome's future. Heracles dragged Cerberus out as his 12th labor. The dog was later returned, unharmed but sulking. Their tales agreed on one thing: the dead craved blood offerings to briefly regain memory and voice. Without rituals, they became faceless crowds in the mist, their identities dissolving like salt in water. This was the Greeks' true terror, not punishment, but being forgotten. Hence their elaborate funeral rites, grave markers, and annual festivals to feed the dead. To have one's name spoken was to persist, to be erased was the final death. As Hades watched from his ebony throne, he knew all threads eventually reached his realm. Even gods feared being cast down to Tartarus, as the Titans had been. Mortality's gift was this: a life burns brightest when shadowed by its end. The Roman reality, a peasant's daily grind. Congratulations, you've time-traveled to ancient Rome. Not as an emperor lounging in a marble villa, but as a plebeian in a crumbling insula where the walls sweat in summer and your upstairs neighbor stomps like a legion on march. This is survival, not history books. Dawn in the insula. Your day begins before sunrise, jolted awake by a donkey's death rattle bray. Chamber pots being dumped onto the street, with or without the customary cave warning. The wet cough of a neighbor who definitely has consumption. Your apartment, a single room shared with 2 relatives and a family of rats, smells of mildew, urine, and last night's fish sauce. The floor sticks to your bare feet. You lost your sandals in a dice game. You scrape your teeth with a frayed twig, Roman toothpaste being a paste of ash and vinegar that makes your gums bleed. Breakfast of champions. You gnaw on yesterday's bread, hard as brick, possibly containing sawdust or ground bone filler. Pulse, a barley porridge that tastes like wet cardboard unless you can afford a drizzle of rancid garum, fermented fish guts. Pasca, vinegar water wine that strips your throat but kills parasites. No meat, no fruit. Those are for citizens with coin. You eat like this because the alternative is the grain-dole, state-sponsored wheat that marks you as Rome's poorest. Missing it means hunger. Relying on it means shame. The job hunt. You join the crowd at the forum's labor pool, hoping to be hired for. Construction. Hauling bricks for new baths, your back screaming by noon. Sewer maintenance. Wading through the Cloaca Maxima's human sludge. Funeral work. Carrying corpses during plague seasons when the pits never fill. Today you land a rare good job, assisting a scribe outside the law courts. But assisting means holding his stylus case while he berates you for breathing too loud. At midday, he tosses you in his copper coin and half a sausage. You swallow it in one gulp before the stray dogs notice. Afternoon hazards. Walking home requires ninja reflexes. Avoid the tonsors barber shops where men gossip. You owe 3 creditors. Dodge the Phalonici laundry shops. Their urine vats for bleaching togas splash passers-by. Sidestep political graffiti like "Caesar licks goats." Defacing property means flogging. You pass the public latrines, a row of marble holes where men conduct business shoulder to shoulder, sponge stick passed around like some cursed relay baton. The stench makes your eyes water. Dinner in darkness, if you're lucky. A handful of lentils boiled with a scrap of salt pork. Stale bread dipped in pasca to soften it. A bruised fig stolen from the market's discard pile. You eat watching the sunset through your single window, a crack in the wall. Really? Somewhere on the Palatine Hill, senators feast on stuffed dormice and honeyed wine. Here, you pick weevils from your meal. As night falls, you lie on a straw mat crawling with fleas. The insula creaks, someone's gambling upstairs, a baby wails next door. You pray to your lararium's tiny household gods that the building doesn't collapse or burn before morning. This isn't living. This is enduring. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again. The invisible hands that built Rome. While senators debated in marble halls and emperors erected golden statues, Rome's true engine hummed in the shadows, the countless unnamed souls whose calloused hands laid every brick, scrubbed every floor, and buried every corpse. This is their story, written not in stone but in the weariness of bones. The water-bearer's burden. Before dawn, you join the aquarii at the fountain house. Your job? Haunting Rome's 1,212 public fountains with clay jars strapped to your back. The aqueducts may be engineering marvels, but their water doesn't magically appear in fifth-floor insulae. That's your work, climbing staircases that sway like drunkards, knees buckling under 50-pound loads, for 10 hours straight. The pay? For asses a day, just enough for bread and a corner in some stinking tenement. Miss a step and spill your jars? That comes out of your wages. The rich complain if their wine is tepid. You ration sips of tepid water like battlefield rations. The fuller's chemical burns. In the Phalonici, workers stand knee-deep in vats of human urine collected from public toilets, stomping on patricians' togas. The ammonia bleaches stains but also eats through your sandals, then your skin. By noon, your feet blister. By month's end, your toenails fall off. The foreman claims it's honorable work. You're cleaning the garments of Rome's great men. But when a consular candidate visits and sees your ulcerated legs, he holds a perfumed cloth to his nose and demands his new toga come from a less revolting establishment. The corpse collector's secret. When plague hits, and it always does, you're recruited for the libidinarii, Rome's death squads. Your tools? A hooked pole and a vinegar-soaked rag over your face. The routine never changes. Knock. Wait. Smell that sweet rotten air. Drag the body out, if it hasn't liquefied. Toss it onto the cart with the others. Seniority determines whether you get the head or feet in. The worst aren't the plague victims, but the suicides hanged in their doorways so families can claim they died suddenly. You cut them down with the same indifference as butchering hogs. The child labor no one mentions. Your little sister works the Pastrina bakery at age 7. Her tasks? Fanning the oven, eyelashes singed off by August. Picking pebbles from grain, fingernails permanently split. Dodging the baker's hands when he's drunk. One night she comes home with a honey cake. The mistress felt sorry for me. You both know the price attached to such kindness. You eat it anyway. Hunger outweighs shame. The women's unrecorded toil. While historians chronicle legions and laws, your mother's life leaves no scrolls. For AM, grinding grain at the millstone, knuckles bleeding. Noon, selling woven baskets in the market, haggling over half an ass. Dusk, mending your tunic by oil lamp, squinting through failing eyes. Her back curves like a question mark by 30. By 40, she's gone, not from plague or violence, just worn out like a frayed rope finally snapping. No funeral, just a pauper's pit beyond the city walls. Why they endured? Because sometimes there are moments. The public bath's warmth when you sneak in at closing. A soldier tossing you an apple core still sweet near the stem. The day your scribe employer actually says thank you. Rome never loved you back. But you loved it anyway. Its chaotic streets, its vulgar jokes, its stubborn refusal to collapse despite being built on broken backs. When you die, probably before 30, no one will carve your name in marble. But when future scholars wonder how an empire functioned without machines, tell your ghost this. The real miracle wasn't the aqueducts. It was the people who carried its water. Gods of the forgotten corners. While Jupiter's temples gleamed on Capitol Hill, smaller shrines huddled in Rome's alleyways, places where the poor prayed to gods too humble for marble. These were the deities of cracked thresholds and rusted hinges, who understood hunger better than thunder. Cardea, goddess of door pivots. You whisper to her when your insula's rotting door finally gives way. Her altar? A nail scratched with 3 lines above your entryway. She keeps out. Thieves, when combined with 3 locks you can't afford. Evil spirits and the landlord's evil glares. Stray dogs that smell your meager dinner. Her protection costs only a crumb of bread, stolen from your own portion. But when the wood holds, you swear you hear her chuckle in the creaking hinge. Liminus, god of the lintel. He guards what Cardea won't the space above your door wear. Scorpions drop from the ceiling. Neighbors' leaks first appear. The eviction notices get nailed. You paint his symbol, a crooked T, in charcoal. When the tenement collapses 3 doors down but yours stands, you pour your entire wine ration at the threshold. It's more than he's gotten in decades. Forculus, spirit of the hinge itself. The squeak that warns of intruders. The groan when winter swells the wood. You oil him with stolen kitchen fat, praying he doesn't betray you to the rent collector. Together, these 3 form Rome's lesser trinity, the holy guardians of people who don't own walls, just the right to huddle between them. Parsi, the working class fates. Not the majestic Moirai of Greek myth, but 3 washerwomen who wring out destiny by the Tiber. Decima scrubs your life thread on her washboard. Nona beats it with her paddle to test its strength. Morta decides whether to hang it to dry or toss it in the rag pile. Their shrine is the riverside rock where laundry women gossip. Leave them a button, and they might wring out your troubles, or at least make your shirt last another winter. Anna Perenna, the drunk aunt of deities. Her festival is the one-day plebeians outrank patricians. At her grove beyond the city. You bring cheap wine, the kind that strips paint. Sing obscene songs about Jupiter's love life. Pass out under bushes with strangers who become family by dawn. The next morning, your head pounds like Vulcan's forge, but for one night, you weren't a nobody, you were Anna's favorite niece/nephew. Genius Cucullatus, the hooted spirits. These shadowy figures haunt crossroads with. Warm cloaks for children who outgrew theirs. Mysterious coins and empty purses. The occasional dead rabbit by a starving family's door. Never seen directly, only glimpsed as a patch to turning a corner. Some say they're minor gods. Others claim they're ghosts of poor souls who helped because nobody helped them. The real magic. These aren't the gods who get epic poems. But when your door holds against a storm, you find an extra coin in your pouch. The fever breaks on the 3rd night. You know who to thank. No grand temples for them, just a smear of oil here, a muttered verse there. Their power lies in what they don't promise, not victory or wealth, just the strength to endure what tomorrow brings. As you kneel before your makeshift altar, a crate with a chipped cup, the smells of cheap wine and cheaper meat mix with the alley stench. Somewhere above, a senator's feast sends music drifting down. But here in the dark, your gods listen.